Hello and welcome to my review of the Constellation Saga by MacLeod. This is a review of the first three books, which as of the time that I'm filming this are the only three books that have been published, but there will be more. The first book is Heirs of Power, the second book is The Mage-Lord's Legacy, and the third book is Conquest of the Ten. I will be talking about all three books in this review, but I will just be holding up the first one, Heirs of Power. This is a high fantasy series about a group of magically endowed heroes who are off to save the world. In essence, the main character, Kitty, lives in a small town on the outskirts of this very large kingdom. One day, while patrolling the woods with her father, she comes across some people who have what appears to be magical abilities. They throw fire at them, and Kitty has no idea what's going on, and her father sends her to the city to have a meeting with the queen. At this point, Kitty learns that she also has magical ability, which she had up until this point not known existed, and she, along with a group of other second-generation heroes, have to band together, learn about their powers to save the world from an evil race who had previously been banished in a different realm, but who are now trying to get into Lucidia, the world where this book takes place, and are intent on destroying that world for their own gain. I gave the first two books, Heirs of Power and The Mage-Lord's Legacy, both 4 stars, and then I gave the third book, Conquest of the Ten, 3 stars, but overall I would rate the series of 4 stars. It was really enjoyable, it was really fun. I would highly recommend if you're into fantasy like this, if you like character-driven fantasy especially, because it was a good time. Like, I did have my issues with it overall, but like, I had a really fun time reading it. I really enjoyed the characters, and it just like flowed really nicely for me, and I was invested, which is pretty much what I want from books like these. Like, I just want to be invested, I want to care, I want to be down for the ride, and I very much was. The characters are definitely the strength of this series. The characters are wonderfully crafted, they're so interesting, they're so distinct. You really care about them very early on. Like, it's very easy to get involved in who they are and their motivations, and every single one of them is so well done. I loved Kitty. Kitty is a fantastic character. You can see her change throughout the series, which I think was really wonderful. You see her develop from who she is at the beginning to who she is, 2 books later, as she's going through this war, as she's seen so much death and destruction, and you can see her priorities change. You see her shift as the character, and it's really wonderful to see that. All the characters are so well done. There are a lot of characters in this, but they have such distinct personalities that like it's not difficult to keep track of everyone. And even beyond that, the relationships between all of them are so distinct. Like, everyone in these books has really like a fantastic relationship based off their differing personalities. Like, some people are quarreling constantly, some people just kind of like fit in with each other, some have kind of like familial type relationships or like parent-child type relationships just based on like who they are and the experience they have, and it's just like all of it's so distinct and so wonderful and so well done. Definitely like the high point of this book is the characters. Like, if you're someone who really does enjoy like a character-driven fantasy novel, I can't recommend this enough. Like, it was so wonderful just to like get absorbed in their lives and their dramas and their like tragedies, but also their little petty dramas and their petty fights and what happens to them. I also really like the world. Like, it's just an interesting magic system, because most of the people in this world, the average humans, don't have any magic, and most of the characters haven't grown up with the knowledge of magic because their magic is a hereditary thing. They get it from their parents. Like, they get these specific abilities. The main character, Kitty, is an archer, so she has basically what amounts to like great vision. She's really great with a bow and arrow, obviously like magically enhanced, not just like very skilled, and a few other small traits that go along with that. And then you have a juggler who can basically teleport objects when he touches them. Like, they have to be like a similar size. Like, he has limitations to that, but he can like touch this book and pull a book from the other side of the room and like switch them. And there's a dancer, there's a swordsman. Like, there's a great variety of magical abilities that are so like distinct and interesting and original, and you really get to see the exploration of their different types of magics and what they can do with them. Like there's a sculptor who can kind of like change the shape of things, but he does it with a lot more than just like, oh, like basic sculpting things. Like he can do it with human bodies, he can do it with like the ground and the earth, and you really see like the stretching of that magical ability, which very, very interesting. In terms of things I didn't like so much about this series, like why it was more of like a 3 to 4 star series than like 4 to 5, for this first book especially, it was very difficult for me to get into. There's a lot of exposition in like the first half of this book, like just explaining everything, explaining who these people are, what the magic's like, the history of like the evil magical race that's trying to take over the world, like what their parents did, because the main character Kitty has no idea about these things, so you pretty much follow along with her as she's learning. So there is a lot of explaining everything and like catching you up to speed on everything that's going on, and it was kind of a struggle for me to get through. I really didn't enjoy that, and like I was very worried that like the whole series was kind of going to be like that and it was going to be a miserable time, and it wasn't. It got so much better. It started flowing into like actual narrative and stuff after the first half, but that was something that I struggled with quite a bit. I also think the dialogue was a bit of an issue for me across all 3 books. It was very expository, it was very like kind of explaining things again. It never sounded natural to me. Like it didn't sound like this was the way people talk. It always sounded a little bit stilted, a little bit fake and forced, which I didn't love. Like kind of a small thing, but like at points there was a lot of dialogue, so it became very noticeable. Like the actual narrative flowed very well for me, like the prose. It was just the dialogue I struggled with a fair bit. I loved all the characters. Like I could go on and on about all the characters. There were so many. I love them all. They're all like fantastic and developed and like interesting people. But I do think there were too many, because there are a fair number of these constellations, which is what the people with magical abilities are called, as well as they pick up some like friends along the way, and it kind of it turns into like a very, very large cast of characters for what is not, you know, a particularly long book. Like there's a reason that books like Game of Thrones are just like obscenely long books, because they have so many characters and you're following like all the different stories, and it just takes that amount of time to like follow everyone. And I felt like there was at points too much going on, like too many people to follow, and they didn't necessarily get like all the time that they deserved. Like I love the characters, but I do think they would have been so much better had they been given more time. And this was especially apparent in the 3rd book, which was why the 3rd book got a slightly lower rating for me. It just seemed like there was a slight pacing problem for me. Like there was so much going on, like not only so many characters, but so many massive events, so many battles, so many problems that needed solving, that like some things happened off the page, like some very important things that there just like wasn't enough time to cover. And then there were other things that were resolved very quickly with little development, and some relationships that happened very quickly with little development, and it all like made sense, and I liked where all of it was going. It just seemed like most of the things in this series needed a little more time, especially later on. This was less of a problem in like this book and the 2nd book, but the 3rd book especially felt like it needed to be like a fair bit longer to just like give everything the time it deserved, because it was all so interesting and so well done. And I really liked the magic system. Like I would have loved for that to be explored more. It was just like within the page count, with all the characters, with all their relationships and all the battles that were going on, it was like there wasn't enough time to really delve deeply into a whole lot, which I wish there had been, because like it was all so interesting and I cared about everything, and I just didn't get to see it all. But even that being said, this was a super fun series. I had such a good time with it. It was like just a really fun read. I'm really glad I got them and picked them up, and I do feel like there are a lot of people who would have fun with this, especially if you are someone who is more inclined to fast-paced books, because I do like things very, very slow. Like this is a complaint that I have frequently, that books are written too fast-paced. So perhaps other people would read this and be like, no, like this pacing's great. So take that criticism with a grain of salt, but the characters were great in this. For a really great like character-driven fantasy series, I'd highly recommend giving this a go. So much fun, such a good time, and definitely worth reading. Let me know down below if you've read the Constellation Saga and what you thought of it if you have, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.